Hello and welcome to Return Zero. Today we're going to be doing a Paperless-ngx install via Portainer. This tutorial will assume that you already have Portainer installed, and I will be releasing a video on how to install Portainer after this video. So I already have the documentation open for Paperless-ngx. It is a community-supported, open-source document management system that transforms your physical documents into an online archive. It is a very useful software where you can scan documents in and they will be accessible via searching, tagging, and many other features. So let's get into it. So the first thing we want to know is we want to set up the paperless application. So if we see that is where it says set up, we see there are many different options for installation. And we know that we want to install with Portainer. However, we can't see anything immediately that says Portainer. So that makes me wonder where any of the documentation is at for specifically Portainer. However, if we go to the GitHub, which I already have open right here, and it is accessible by clicking this link, we can see that if we click Docker and we click Compose, we see that we have all of these options and we also have this Portainer option right here. So that will be the first thing we want. And I'm going to click raw and open this up in another tab. And I'm going to duplicate this tab so I can go back to the GitHub page with Docker. So if we read quickly, we see that to install and update Paperless with this file, we need to do the following. Open Portainer stacks list and click add stack. Okay, so here I have my DNS server, and this is the server that I'll be deploying this on. And I click on that environment and click stacks. So now this blue button says add stack, and we need to add a stack. And I'm just going to name it paperless. So we have these four options right here: web editor, upload, repository, and custom template. So we have done where we can do a raw GitHub file. So I'm just going to do a Control A, then Control C, and paste that into my Portainer. And then I'm going to get rid of this line just for clarity's sakes. And let's see what other steps we have to do. Paste the contents of this file and assign a name. Yep, we already named it paperless. And then we upload our docker compose.env by clicking on load variables from env file. So we don't have that file, so we're going to need to look for that here. There is docker compose.env right on the left, so we'll click that, and this one we will download, and I'm going to download that, and we will open that up and edit the settings accordingly. As you can see, I have my terminal open now, and I download that file. So we are actually already in our downloads file. So if we do a pwd, we can see that I am in my downloads file, our downloads directory. So by ls, I have my password database and then the docker compose file we just downloaded. So I'm going to open this up and we're going to look through this together. So the first thing we see is this user map UID and GID. This is for the write access to the consumption directory. At the moment, I'm not going to change that because I don't exactly understand what it is, but I will eventually read the docs and learn more. So if we're exposing this on a public domain, we will assign it a URL. And currently, I'm not planning to do that, but I might do a further tutorial where I expose it to the internet and walk you through that process. So if we make this available publicly, we will do a paperless secret key, and there are many ways to generate random text. So what I will change though is this paperless time zone, and I am in Eastern time, so we will do new_York. And if you don't know your time zone, there is a great Wikipedia article that lists all of the time zones and their various names that many programmers will use in their programs. And I will link that in the description. and we are speaking English and none of the any other languages at the moment. So that will be everything I change in here, and hopefully that works. And if it doesn't work, we will troubleshoot together. So I'm going to write that file and close out of that. So now that we have our environment variables, we will click load variables from environment file, and then I'll select that file, and we can see that after selecting that file, all of these variables populate themselves. So this should work as far as I'm aware. So what we'll do is click deploy the stack. So we see a success that it successfully deployed, and we will click on paperless, and we see that our web server is starting. So we'll give that a moment to start. Okay, we can see that our web server is now running. So the second thing that we need to do is determine the IP address of our container, which I know how to do, and I already know uh, how to I already know how to do it via SSH. However, I'm not sure how to do it from Portainer. So let's see if we can figure it out together. If we click on our dashboard, we see that we have our environment and the URL is 1.232.9001. So that is the IP address of our DNS server. And we know that our paperless is running on 8001 because the config file that we had specified that port right here, or 8010, not 8001. But the port that it's running on is 8010. So now that we know our IP address and our port, we will type in 192.168.1.232 port 8010. Oh, and it looks like that we ran into a problem. So let's see if we can figure out what the problem is. So if we go back to our Portainer instance, we'll click on our DNS server and we'll click on the stack. So then we get to our paperless and we'll click on paperless web server. We see that it restarted because it was running and I didn't do any commands to stop it. So if it's restarting, let's see why. Logs. So we see right here that it says temporary failure in name resolution. And name resolution would indicate a DNS issue, which points to a network issue. So we also see that it's trying to get some sort of new connection. It's trying to connect to the database, and it's trying to, looks like it's trying to get the name of the database via DNS or just connect to the database. So we also see database errors here. So this points to something either with our network or with the database. So the first thing we'll check is the database. So if we click back to containers, we'll go to our paperless DB1 and we can click this little icon to get to the logs. We see that the data directory was initialized by PostgreSQL version 16, which is not compatible with this version 17.5. So this should be relatively easy to fix. What we'll do is go back to our stacks, remove this, as we don't have any documents that are important in it currently. And then we'll click Add Stack, and we will do the same process over again. We will get our Portainer, raw, then Control A and Control C, and we'll copy this into here. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Name this, and copy it into here. So now we scroll up, and we see that our Postgres version is 17, and the error stated that our database was initialized by Postgres 16. So if we change this to 16, it should, in theory, work. So we need to load our variables from the environment file, and you can just use the same one that you did last time, and we'll get our environment variables populated. Deploy, successfully deployed. So now we click back on our paperless stack, and we'll wait for the web server to start. All right, we see that our paperless web server says healthy. So we know that it's on port 8010, we will type in the IP address of our server and colon 8010 to get to that port. We refresh and we see this sign in. If we go back to our environment variables, if I can find them, or actually, if we go back to the compose file, we say that the Postgres DB and the Postgres user and the Postgres password are all paperless. So if I try to type in paperless for both of these, it doesn't work. And if we go to our documentation, we know that we use the Docker compose template, and we know that we're running on port 8010. We modified our Docker compose with the database script. But if we look at step 7 here, it says when you first access the web interface, you will be prompted to create a super user account, which this is our first access of the paperless web interface, yet it did not prompt us for a super user account. So this is something we will have to troubleshoot together. So if we read step 4 here, this may be the issue. We see that we may need to set user map and user GID um, to the user on the host system. So let's try and do that. So I'm SSHing into the host server, not the server that our Portainer is running on, but the DNS server. So I'm going to log in as root just because we might be running some Docker commands and I don't want to prepend sudo to everything at the moment. So go through there. What we'll do is run an id-u according to the documentations. That's a 0 because we are a root, and we will also do an id-g, and we'll also get a g or a 0. So we will go back to our tech account and do the same thing, an id-u and an id-g. So it looks like the problem that we run into is we did not modify the user ID or GID on the Docker compose. So we will modify that and that'll be hopefully fix the issue. Once again, since we don't have any important documents yet, we can just remove the stack and do it all over again. I've gone ahead and removed the stack and I have my name and changed the variable for the Postgres to version 16. Now the next thing we'll do is go into our Docker Compose and uncomment those lines for the user IDs. Here we have our user map UID and the GID. So we will get rid of the hashtag, which is uncommenting those lines. So I write that file and we will upload that file to Portainer. Now that we have that, we will go down to load variables and I'll open up the file. And we have our user map, UID, GID, time zone, and language. So with all of those, let's hope that this now works. We see a successful deployment. We'll click on paperless and we'll see that it's starting, and hopefully we get a healthy message and a prompt to set a user when we log in. We'll type in our IP address once again and our port 8010, and we see that we don't get a user account prompt, even though we specified the user GID and regular ID as well. So we have to do some further troubleshooting. So if we Google or start page, the search engine that I use, we can't get a super user account from Portainer. We see the first thing here, blaming it on bad documentation, which is partly me skimming through it, and also partly it's not as clear for Portainer. So let's read through this. We see that we have documentation is super bad when it comes to doing it from Portainer, and nothing about the command to run. So apparently there's a command that we have to run to create a super user. So if we scroll down, we don't see a solution here just yet, but it looks like the command works fine for some people, and we have to change it to the right directory So let's see if we can figure that out. We have our Portainer environment open now with our stack, and we will click on exec on our web server. So if we click connect, we are now in the paperless directory that we need to be in. Let's look back at our GitHub page and see what command we need to run. Python 3 manage.py create superuser. Python 3 manage.py create superuser. And hopefully this works. All right, so username, leave blank to use root. We'll just use root. Email address, we'll do test@email.com. And our password will be 1234. 1234. Password is too short. And we'll just bypass that and create it anyway. So now that we have the super user, let's go back to our IP address, 192.168.232, and our port 8010. Oh, that's supposed to be a 1, not a 0. There we go. And it was root and 1234. And we officially have Paperless-ngx up and running. This will be the end of this video. I hope it was helpful. I hope that going through the troubleshooting steps together helps you get some ideas on any problems that you run into. Thank you for watching, and as always, have an amazing day, and don't forget to drink water, eat food, and take care of yourself.